Hello and welcome to another slice of Rye Toast. Today's offering is entitled The Library. Now, I originally planned for this to be a simple retelling of a short story I wrote 30 years ago. But as I continually find when I develop these episodes, it became much more than that, taking off in a completely unexpected direction with twists and turns that I could never have predicted. A journey which would eventually connect my granddaughter Emily, my wife Madeline, and a series of events spanning decades and continents. But more of that later. First, let's begin where I did, in April 1992. The location is a conference room just north of Toronto, where the Markham Toastmasters Club is meeting. Tonight's meeting is special because the members will judge the club's entries for the annual International Speech Contest and vote on their choice to proceed to the next round. One by one, the hopefuls take their turn delivering a 5 to 7 minute prepared speech. And now I hear my introduction along with my speech title. Mike Levy, The Library. The Library. Mike Levy. Followed by a welcoming applause. The audience is seated behind long tables which form a U-shaped arena. As all heads turn toward me, I rise from my seat and make my way into the open end of the arena to a central point which allows me, with just a slight swivel of my head or body, to make eye contact with each audience member and to move freely as I do so. I have no barriers and no notes. I have prepared and rehearsed. I am ready. I glance around the room, take a deep breath, and begin. Madam Chairman, fellow Toastmasters and honoured guests. A man wakes with a start. Where is he? What's happening? Bewildered, he takes in his surroundings and realizes he is standing in a cavernous room with bookshelves that stretch into the infinite distance, populated with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands. There are a lot of books on those shelves. And as his eyes adjust, it becomes apparent that this is some kind of library. And as he begins to make out the detail, he realizes the books are journals of some kind, with names inscribed in gold leaf on their spines. He raises his gaze, and in the far distance, in the central aisle, he notices a solitary piece of furniture, and not knowing what else to do, he makes his way hesitantly towards it. Perhaps it will provide a clue to why he is here. His footsteps faintly echo as he approaches what turns out to be an ornate antique writing desk. And on the desk is an open volume, which he curiously examines. And as he does so, he begins to experience a strange feeling of lightheadedness and confusion, because on the spine is his name. Uneasily, he turns to the first page and begins to leaf through the book, scanning the contents. It documents activities that are eerily familiar, and it dawns on him that these are the events of his life. In fact, not just the events, they are his accurately documented intimate thoughts, feelings, and ideas that he has never, ever shared with another human being, and all forged perfectly in his own handwriting. He reads about his childhood, his ambitions and hopes as a young man, how he has married this wonderful woman and parented 2 beautiful children. Time seems suspended as he continues to leaf through the pages, and as he does so, he begins to notice a change in tone from the optimism of the earlier entries. How he has gradually become focused on material things, on power and wealth, and how his ambition has slowly soured to disappointment, how disappointment has crumbled to despair, and as he turns to the final written page, he confronts the appalling truth that he has today decided that he is of no value to himself and his family, and he has resolved to end his life. He is frozen in shock and disgust. His arms drop to his side, and he stands there stunned, slumped, paralyzed, and drained of all emotion. Now we'll never know how long he stands there. But eventually he feels a gentle breeze, as though someone in a far unseen corner of the room has opened the door just slightly, and carried on that breeze, skipping across the floor, comes a sheet of paper which catches his attention and momentarily interrupts his anguish. He wonders what more indignities the world could possibly heap on him. But after a few moments of bitter reflection, his curiosity gets the better of him, and he stoops to scoop the paper up. To his surprise, he sees that it is a crude drawing, like a child might make in kindergarten. There are 3 figures depicted. The first is a woman with her mouth downturned at the corners. She looks sad. The second is the figure of a man with narrowed eyes, and he looks angry. And in the corner of the picture is a smaller figure, a little child, and the child is weeping. And underneath them all is a printed caption. Happy, spelled H-A-P-Y. Happy birthday, Daddy. Happy birthday, Daddy. Happy birthday, Daddy. It's his birthday. He's been so wrapped up in his own despair that he's forgotten his own birthday. And with this realization, a solitary, salty tear wells up from his eye and runs down his cheek into the corner of his mouth. But something has changed. In its place, the tear has left a glint in his eye, and a thought occurs to him. He examines the desk. There's a drawer, and in the drawer is a gold pen. Thoughtfully, he picks it up, slowly turns to the next blank page in the journal, and after a moment, he starts to hesitantly write. Slowly at first, he writes of long-forgotten hopes and ideals. His writing picks up speed. Now his thoughts are in full flow. His hand is becoming a blur as he completes page after page. It's like a curtain has been raised, allowing the light and love in his life to shine in for the first time in a very long while. And now he can't write fast enough. This is marvelous. Why hasn't anybody told him about this? Why hasn't he realized it could feel this wonderful to be alive? Suddenly, the light becomes blinding, the walls disappear, and he finds himself in bed. He jumps up and yells, "Oh boy, this is a great day!" And he stops. He can't remember why he feels this way, but he knows there's a good reason, and today is going to be the best darn day of his life. And he's going to make sure it's a special one for those he loves. So, I'm curious. As I look around this room, I'd like to ask each of you a question. When was the last time you visited your local library? And when you visited, did you find the book that was looking for you? And if you did you know that you were allowed to write in it? And if you did write in it, then there's probably going to be a day, sometime soon, when you will awake with a start, a beautiful, life-affirming, fresh start. Madam Chairman. After the session, more than one club member approached me, concerned that the story was in some way autobiographical and that I had personally contemplated suicide. It wasn't, and I hadn't. The part about marrying a wonderful woman and parenting 2 beautiful children was true. But everything else was fiction, inspired by my finding an old birthday card which one of my daughters had indeed signed, Happy, spelled H-A-P-Y, Birthday Daddy. And that seed was fertilized in my imagination by a love of self-help literature, a fondness for biographies of people who turn their lives around, and a steady diet of Twilight Zone episodes. And yes, my peers did vote me the winner that night, and I went on to win again at a couple more levels before being eliminated when the competition got really tough. Now, in the normal course of events, this would be the end of my tale. But here's where it gets really interesting, because there's a story beyond the story. And for that, we need to jump forward 30 years to the spring of 2022, when I decided that this Rye Toast offering would be based on that 1992 speech, and while the idea was still germinating in the recesses of my mind. I was on a family vacation with granddaughter Emily just before the start of her first year of university. One day, when visiting the small town of Bayfield, Ontario, Emily and I split off from the rest of the group to visit the village bookshop. The store, situated in a Victorian-era converted house, looks just like the name suggests it should. Emily is an avid reader and pointed out a book that she had recently enjoyed by a British author, Matt Haig. I didn't recognize that name at the time, but the title immediately caught my attention. The Midnight Library. So I browsed the synopsis, and this quote jumped off the page at me. "Between life and death, there is a library," she said, "and within the library the shelves go on forever. Every book provides a chance to try another life you could have lived, to see how things would be if you had made other choices. Would you have done anything different if you had the chance to undo your regrets?" Sounds familiar. Intrigued, I turned to the opening sentence of the first chapter and read this. 19 years before she decided to die, Nora Seeds sat in the warmth of the small library at Hazeldean School in the town of Bedford. That sentence would have been enough to hook me on its own, but Bedford? The town in England where Madeline was born? That was one connection too many. I had to have this book. The cover said #1 international bestseller, over 2 million copies sold, but I knew it was written just for me. So I thanked Emily for the recommendation, tapped with my phone to buy the book, and read it over the next few days. And that led to the discovery of more connections. One of the characters was a marathon runner, as am I, but more significantly, another character worked at the London Brick Company in Bedford. I knew that company name because Madeline's family was evacuated to Bedford during the World War II bombing of London, and her mother and aunt both worked at the London Brick Company. And it turns out Hazeldean School is a real elementary school, located not far from the Bedford Hospital where Madeline was born. And one more unexpected connection. I said that I didn't recall ever hearing of the author, Matt Haig, but on my return home, I discovered a book on my shelf called, interestingly, Reasons to Stay Alive by, yes, you guessed it, Matt Haig. Then I remembered having ordered it a few weeks earlier. Probably, I later realized, because Emily had recommended him to me. I had briefly researched him, been intrigued by this title, his only non-fiction work, by the way, and ordered it, only to throw it on a shelf and forget about it and him and Emily's recommendation. So, of course, I belatedly read it, and revealed one even more bizarre connection. While the character in my speech was fictional, Matt Haig relates in Reasons to Stay Alive how in his early 20s he literally came to the brink of suicide as he stared down over the edge of a cliff on the Spanish island of Ibiza. Thankfully, he turned around, and 25 years later is now a best-selling author of adult and children's fiction. Some final notes. The 1992 Toastmasters meeting was held in the basement conference room of, where else? The Markham Village Library. The London Brick Company still exists, although it's no longer in Bedford. It was never in London either. Its name reflects the distinctive type of brick that they still manufacture. Its origins date to the year 1889. And as for the building which houses the village bookshop in Bayfield, where Emily introduced me to the Midnight Library, it was built in, yes, 1889. Connections, connections, connections. I haven't called them coincidences. My good friend Ivor recently told me,
someone once said that there is no such thing as coincidence. It's just God's way of remaining anonymous.
Well said, Ivor. What do you think? Until next time, this is Right Toast.